like I said, both studios, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedroom units. Feel free to go into any more detail on that, Brett.
Sure. I mean, continuing on that, just from the building itself, again, it's 3 stories with the mix that Brian mentioned of the type of studio, or type of units, looking at attracting young professionals, some empty nesters, which we feel want to be in this type of location. Walkability to all the restaurants and retail that we have in Oregon. That's what we liked about the site so much. Some of the amenities we'll have in the building, there's underground parking, like we mentioned. There's going to be a fitness center in there. There'll be a community room. Kind of figure out exactly what that community room means, but probably just open area, places for residents to gather, maybe to watch TV, play cards, whatnot. We'll have a leasing office there as well. On the outside, from an amenity standpoint, we'll have a nice area on the building, and Brian can show you too, our architect, but a nice kind of outside, private, open patio area where the residents can grill out and enjoy themselves. And then from there, we can probably just go into some of the plans. And Brian, you want to give an overview of the site plan? And
sure. Right, trip over the corner.
Yeah, we take this.
That's good thinking.
I'm Brian Stoddard, project architect from Canothy and Bruce Architects. I'd like to give you a sort of a quick overview of the project. This aerial shot shows the Spanry property as it sits today. You can see there's a number of parcels that are being combined to create this lot. One of the things that will come up in one of the later boards is this gives you a aerial perspective of the medical clinic here, which we're looking at potentially doing a parking lot connection at some future date. The other thing just to point out in the aerial that will come up later is there are currently 2 driveway entrances into the village parking lot here. We're looking at eliminating this one and maintaining this one. So this is our site design. You can see, as I just referenced, this is the driveway entry point we're keeping. General parking circulation is through a couple of optional loop routes. What we're doing is keeping the existing loading zone along the commercial properties here, and we've designed this parking lot to accommodate delivery vehicles and the way it functions now, basically. It's actually, in our opinion, a significant improvement over the flow of the existing parking lot. This line here, which will come up on a later board too, is a proposed new property line. So for the apartment buildings, we're looking at taking these stalls here to service our need at the parking, or for the parking at the apartments here. The rest of these parking stalls would be the village parking area. As Brett pointed out earlier, we've got some site amenities here. We've got a nice green space out here. This is our primary entry to the building. And with the railroad tracks running here to the west, they're elevated, and it creates a nice little private pocket back here where we've got an outdoor patio. The units that are on the first floor along Jefferson Street here will have entries directly off of the Jefferson Street sidewalk. We're also elevating the building about 3 to 4 feet above the Jefferson Street sidewalk to give the units a little more privacy and to create an urban sort of feel to those units.
I just wanted to mention too, last week we had the opportunity to meet with the Thiels. I see Bonnie is here, but Jerry as well. First from an introduction standpoint, because we had not met them yet, but more meeting with the neighbors, understanding their concerns, their thoughts. And they had some good ideas. The main concern from what Planning Commission was parking, and trying to understand, is there enough parking? Are we maintaining the amount of stalls that the village currently has? Are we improving that? How can we make that a better flow? So one thing that the Thiels brought up was maybe connecting into their lot as well, the Ziggy's lot. Does that make sense? Our engineer is looking at that right now to see if that's something that could be achievable. But I thought that was a really good idea to, one, improve the flow in and out, and then two, maybe offer some overflow parking at some point in some different arrangement down the road. But just wanted to point that out as well.
So the overall general approach to this parking area is to combine the village lot with our parking needs so that by combining them, we're creating more efficiency and a better parking layout, basically. So here in the green line, you can see that that's the existing village parcel with the village parking lot on it, and the Spannery parcel is back here. So what this board represents is the existing parking layout for the village parking lot. There are currently 31 stalls shown there. So here are those two existing entry points with the loading zone. So in order to improve the efficiency of the parking layout and still maintain the 31 existing stalls in the village lot, what we're proposing is to do a quasi land swap, so to speak. In the area in the blue shade here that is currently village parking would become part of the Spannery property, and this area shaded in green is Spannery property that would become village property. There's 3,000 square feet here, 6,000 square feet here, so it ends up being a net gain in area to the village of 3,000 square feet. So here you see that adjusted property line now. Again, maintaining the 31 village stalls, and what we're proposing for our apartment use is 28 surface stalls here.
Another conversation we had leading into some additional parking, how do we create that for people that want to go to the downtown restaurants and retail, is we feel very comfortable with what we have right now for the 28 stalls. We have 60 underground stalls, which will be included. We're not going to charge extra. They'll be included in the rent. So each unit, except for one, there's 61 units, there's 60 underground stalls. Maybe Brian could squeeze us one more in there somehow, so you can get creative. That'd be helpful. So each unit will get one underground unit, and then the remaining 28 will be for visitors, for extra tenants that have an extra car. But we're thinking, and again, we need to wait on this, but these 9 in the middle right here, 6 right here and 3 right here, there's a potential where we could figure out something, lease those back to the village for downtown patrons to use. Not exactly sure right now, but we're open to discussing, open to talking about it. We just we can't do it right now because we don't know. We feel like we have plenty of stalls, but until we fill the building up and see what is needed, we'll just have to wait on that. But we are open to doing that, open to talking with the village about that and providing those stalls if we can.
Just to expand on the parking a little more, we're always interested in the parking ratios per units and the type of units that are there. Currently on this project, we have 1 stall per unit for a studio apartment, and for the 1 bedrooms, 50% of those units we've allocated 2 stalls for. And for the 2 bedrooms, 80% of those units have 2 stalls allocated to them. Overall, for the whole project, if you average it out, we're just under 1.5 stalls per unit total, which is a number that we're very comfortable with.
Just under 1.5 stalls.
Yeah, just under 1.5. We'll get into the building architecture a little bit. What we've done is tried to meet the design guidelines for the downtown district. And what that means is basically breaking the building mass up into smaller components so it fits proportionally into the downtown rhythm, if so to speak. It also, what we've done to give it an urban feel is to put this base course of Cordova stone. And you can see that's where we've lifted the building up out of the ground, as I described before. And you can see the individual entry points to those units. We've tried to use a substantial amount of brick on the Jefferson Street elevation just because to help tie it in to the downtown materials. When we get to the top of the structure, we're going to a composite siding and breaking the color, again, to help break down the mass of the building and to create that sort of horizontal rhythm at that point. This exhibit represents basically a massing study to see how the building fits in with the mass of the building on the corner. So this is basically a Google shot with our buildings dropped in, and this is the existing building on the corner. This shot is a little distorted because we're kind of looking back at it, so it kind of shrinks this. This is probably a more accurate view of how the masses relate, and by our estimate, we're within probably 6 feet of the overall building height of the building on the corner. We're a little higher, but you can see it fits in there pretty comfortably. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Mr. Bali?
Yes, so if I understand the project.
Excuse me, Jerry, could you move your mic up a little
Sure.
bit? Thank you.
So if I understand the project, everything from the back of the Main Street building, or the South Main Street buildings, all the way over to the rail corridor will be gone, all those buildings.
Yeah, there's 4 houses along
Yep.
Jefferson Street. They're all going.
And then
yeah.
there's a strip of commercial buildings that are back there, so that'll all be gone.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that because I've had people ask me about that. So it sounds like there are going to be a net gain of parking in the public parking?
Right now, it's the same amount.
Same amount, okay, so I'm just concerned that it wouldn't diminish that parking. That's fine. When will you start the demo work, the demolition work?
Initially, when we purchased the property, we thought maybe the end of March, and the leases that we found, we had to figure out through looking through the leases what actually we had for expiration dates. Right, most of them are all month to month, which is good. So we've given everybody notice to make sure everybody knows they're on month to month. And as of right now, we are end of February that everybody has notice to be out by. We're moving some people out already. I think one of the houses will be vacated by the end of this month, and then another one end of next month. And Recreational Concepts, I believe, has found another location as well, so they might be leaving at the end of December as well. So the earlier the better for us, and what that allows us to do is start some demo in March. And if people get out even earlier, then we'd like to start that in February. I mean, if permitting can be done by then, but.
Right, depends on the weather too, I would imagine.
Correct, yeah.
So you'll be you have a date of completion estimate?
Hope spring of 2018.
Okay, so about 1 year.
Yeah.
And so you'll probably start leasing about that same time then, about the spring?
Hopefully we have a bunch rented by then,
Okay.
by move-in. So we would start marketing them, probably heavy marketing, 4 months
Okay.
plus. I mean, we'll have them out there on the websites and everything probably, fall-ish. But until we really know exactly when the move-in date would be, we don't want to commit to taking applications. But yeah, we'll put on the heavy marketing, 3 to 4 months before it opens.
Our contractor's given us an estimate of 12 to 14 months for start to finish on the building.
Okay.
So
All right. No, I expect that you'll rent those pretty quickly. I think there's quite a demand in the village for rental, and I just want to say this is a great project because it removes the current, I don't even know how to phrase it.
Blighted.
Pardon?
It's under,
Blighted.
it's an underutilized site.
Yes, there you go. It'll remove that underutilized site and replace it with something that's very pleasing and modern. Finally, are you going to put a sign up at some point indicating future home of?
Yes, yes. Probably when we do the demo. I guess we haven't really talked about that.
We don't want to be too ambitious either without any approval, so.
No, but I mean,
You-
after the approvals are
Yeah,
done.
that would be the
Of all
plan.
the things that are going on in the village, this is what I'm getting the most.
Our banker asked when they can put a sign up, so
Yeah, okay.
we'll try to get one up too.
Thank you, those are all my questions. Great project.
Doug had a question.
Yeah, in the general development plan, there's a recommendation that a traffic study be done. And there's a comment that some of the impacts on nearby streets may be accomplished with off-site traffic improvements. Do you have any idea what those might be at this point?
Actually, the traffic engineer has been retained
Next
by
item.
the village. Will be coming up to talk about that in just a few minutes.
Oh,
So it's next item on the agenda.
okay.
Yep.
Steve, can I just say one thing for timing?
go ahead.
So if this gets approved by the village board in December, they still have to come back and do the SIP in front of the planning commission, and then they also are submitting a TIF request for the project, so we'll be seeing them a couple more times.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the approvals won't be done until next spring, or?
Well, the planning side of it could be done, but then we get stuff, like I said, they put a TIF request in.
Right.
So it's hard to say the timing. But I just want the board to know, you got GDP, SIP, and then a TIF request.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yep. Sir.
Just two questions, Brett and Brian. First, with the properties beginning to be vacant by December, what's the plan to keep them from becoming nuisance properties over the January, February months?
Like squatting properties, like people getting into them. It's a good question. We haven't really talked about that too much, but I mean, we have other properties in other areas of the city, Madison, Sun Prairie, other places where, you can only do so much in terms of locking them up. I don't think we'll board up everything at this point, unless we do see a problem. If people are getting in somehow, I mean, we'll make sure people can't get in through windows and doors and whatnot. Don't want to have anybody having parties there on the weekends, that's for sure. So something that Brian and I should probably talk about a little bit more.
And
It's
again,
a
our
good
property
question.
manager's pretty involved. She was actually there twice last week. There was quite a bit of deferred maintenance just to extend these leases for the 3 or 4 months we needed to fulfill some of the obligations. So we spent quite a bit of time on those properties. She knows them all very well, and we have some other properties we're renting right now on Drumlin Circle. So she's here a couple times a week. So we can make some efforts with stopping by more and making sure that there is no unwanted visitors. I think boarding them up just draws attention. So the less we can do to let people know that they're vacant, and we'll continue to remove snow and do the items to make them look as lived in as possible. But we hope it's a very short time.
And then my second question is, in your estimation, is construction dependent on TIF financing, or are you prepared to build without TIF financing if that's necessary?
The project's dependent on TIF.
Those are my questions.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I think it's nice that you're going to keep the 31 stalls for the downtown. I know the business people have been asking about that, and that's really great.
And we're still making efforts too to see how we can make this better. I mean, whether it be leasing back or doing some kind of shared maintenance agreement with the village to use some of our stalls for the public if we don't need them. It was 80% of the planning meeting was talking about parking and trying to do the best scenario possible. The civil engineers have looked at it a lot and continue to, do what we can to, not make it worse by any means.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would mention too on parking, we have asked our staff who work here to not park in the lot out here and to voluntarily move into parking on the streets, which is almost always empty, which opens up 10 spots, I believe.
10 to 12.
Yeah, it certainly looks like that is having a big impact too. So, and that's going to mean that employers and employees who park in those spots now need to move across the street or farther down, I think, to make it work. But to open those up, that we've opened up 10 or 12 stalls right out here. It doesn't affect your project, but it does affect parking. So.
The other thing we attempted to do is Brett had reached out to one of his contacts at UW to see if opening up the accessibility would create any opportunity for them to legally let some nighttime parking go, and they weren't really open to taking that liability on. But again, we'll continue to make efforts and do what we can to make this better for the downtown businesses.
Okay, yeah, we appreciate that. Thanks. And appreciate you staying in touch with the downtown business people and communicate well. Sounds like you are. So.
We're starting to. I mean, I wish we would have done it a little bit earlier. That was our fault. So, at their first initial meeting last week, and hopefully more of those to come. So.
Good. I think you can catch up on that.
Yeah.
The best part about missing something is admitting that you should have done it and moving forward. That's a sign of a good leader. So, good for you.
Steve,
Anything else?
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
So I can't remember where this came up. Maybe it was at the staff meeting or the planning commission meeting, or somebody asked whether or not an employer can make an employee park. Let's say somebody over there says to their employee, you have to park in the village hall parking lot to create, because I think we were told at the planning commission meeting, Gene, I think I'm like 25 of the parking spaces on a regular basis are employees, or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. So then the question was, can an employer make an employee park in a different lot? Matt, associate.
Yeah, I sent my associate an email actually
I mean, it was a
right
staff.
during the meeting,
Oh, was it?
staff meeting, and asked her to look at the question. She got back to me later that day. She took a look. I'm not going to say she looked under every rock and from a legal research standpoint, but her initial review indicated she couldn't find any indication or any reason why an employer could not require an employee to park, use on-street parking instead of, the customer parking lot, for example. So I don't want to say that's the definitive answer, but that was certainly her preliminary conclusion.
Yeah, good. And that's certainly a big help.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt, for checking on that. So we don't have a motion yet, I don't believe.
No, do you want?
You're bringing the motion, we need a
Yeah.
second, right?
Should we
you wanna
go
read
down
that
the
then?
list? Jeff,
Yes.
do you want to do the review of the traffic study?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, just a little background in the concept phase of the project. I think everyone agreed that a couple of things that was going to be concerned with this project would be just obviously the parking, which was a main concern, but then also traffic flow in this area, specifically the fact that we have along Jefferson Street, we have so many points of contact there. We have 2 into this parking lot. We have the alleyway from Quick Trip, and we have 2, I believe, into BMO Harris Bank. And it's all kind of in that tight area. So both the village and the developers felt it mutually beneficial for all to be looking at this, since it impacts our parking lot, it impacts our alleyway across the street, and it impacts their development. So the village entered into a contract with Jeff Held from Strand Associates, and he's here tonight. He'll just kind of give a brief update on the project, or the study is in progress, but knowing how this is moving forward, we really wanted, if there were any questions from the board tonight on, what kind of impact this is, to have kind of at least a better feel for how the traffic study is turning out before the final can come out, say, in December. So I've worked with Jeff for many years, and he comes very highly recommended, and so he's going to kind of just give a summary on what he's seen so far.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Again, I'm Jeff Held with Strand Associates.
Welcome.
Thank you. And we are in sort of the middle of the traffic study. We've got some initial findings, and I'll touch on a little bit of that here. But to start with, I'll kind of give you our approach. And it starts with data collection. I was out and observed the signal at Main and Jefferson towards the end of October, and performed turning movement counts at that time to determine how much traffic moves through the intersection, and also at the same time kept an eye on the Quick Trip alley, cars in and out of that, as well as the public parking lot to the south. So that forms the basis for our analysis, is starting with the existing conditions. took a look at the proposed site plan, and then the next step is really trip generation. So taking a look at how many trips we would expect to come in and out of a apartment building like the one that's proposed. We then assign that to the street network, and we take a look at sort of the before and the after conditions. So how does it operate today, and how would we expect it to operate after opening of the apartment building? And then we'll develop some recommendations based on that. As Jeff mentioned, the primary issue is probably the number of driveways along Jefferson Street west of Main, and if there'd be a way to clean up some of the conflict points there, the crossing paths that can occur from those driveways, that maybe end up being one of our recommendations. But we're still sort of forming those at this time. I can give you a couple of sort of initial findings. We're still doing quality control and that sort of thing, but as far as the traffic operations, we use a program called SynchroSim Traffic, which simulates the traffic out there. And based on the counts, the intersection generally operates pretty well today. We usually focus on the peak hours in the morning and the afternoon. If I remember right, I think it was 7:15 to 8:15 in the morning, and I think it was 4:45 to 5:45 at night, maybe 4:30, 5:30. There's about 1,000 to 1,200 vehicles that enter the intersection during those peaks, a little lower in the morning, about 1,000 in the morning, 1,200 in the afternoon. And from a operations standpoint, we focus on what's called level of service, which is primarily based on the average delay a vehicle experiences moving through. And right now, the intersection operates overall at a level of service C, which is sort of a passing grade. They run A through F, kind of like grades in school. And all the movements are at a C or better as well. So right now, it's operating pretty well. The trip generation, our initial result, shows about an additional 30 cars in and out of the site during the AM or the PM peak each. And it generally isn't, you think, well, there's 60 units, wouldn't there be 60 trips? But that's just generally not the case. These are based on national trends from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And so that's, on the driveway, that's a somewhat of an increase as far as the overall traffic in and out of the intersection. Not all those trips will even go to the signal, and those that do, you're talking about a pretty small increase in traffic at the signal itself. And so we do expect the intersection will operate pretty similar to today. Most people won't notice a whole lot of difference at the signal itself after the apartments are open. There may be, as I mentioned, opportunities to modify some of the driveways along Jefferson Street, and I suspect that'll be our primary recommendation. I don't expect that we're going to suggest that big changes are needed at the signal, whether timings or changing how the lanes are configured or anything like that. So that's kind of where we're at. That's about all I brought tonight as a general overview, but I'd be happy to answer some questions if you guys have them.
Other questions? Looks like you answered them already.
All right.
For the time being. So thanks, Mr. Slavny.
Yep. Are you going to stick around while in case we have questions as we go?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think that one main benefit of the project that is subtle is that if the property exchange occurs, then the public parking lot will extend all the way to that common property line with the health clinic and with Siggy's. And right now, that is part of the redevelopment site. And by making that exchange, then if and when the opportunity arises to interconnect the parking lots and create that loop to the south, the village will be in a position to agree for its part. We aren't dependent on another property owner. So that would have a positive impact on the traffic flow in the downtown, not only for the proposed project, but for everyone.
Okay, good, thanks, Mike.
Mike, our number 3 is the review of the planner's memo by you. Did you want to go over that right now, or is that kind of your summation?
Oh, I don't want to get you out of order.
Well, no, we're actually up to you.
Yeah. You're in order.
And some of it was discussed during the overview, but.
Yeah.
Well, I think the most important part of my memo is to remind the board that the general development plan is the zoning step, where we would create a unique zoning district just for this property. If the general development plan is approved, then the property owner has the right to do an apartment building that's 3 stories tall and approximately 61 units with the parking configuration as laid out. If approved, then the property has to come back for final details, landscaping, lighting, precise building materials and colors, and that goes to the Plan Commission for approval. So tonight is the key step in terms of, is this a project that the board wants to have happen? And so the findings that I put in my report are the findings that come from the zoning map amendment, part of our zoning code. And I'm suggesting that you make a finding in the affirmative that if this project is approved, conditions have changed. This site has lingered in a state that was, in my opinion, ripe for redevelopment, but because of diverse property ownership and the lack of perhaps a viable market for redevelopment, it hasn't happened. We have a project now that, in my opinion, is absolutely typical of projects I'm seeing this year and last year in our peer communities. So not Middleton or Fitchburg, but the next ring of communities out. For the first time, really are getting projects similar to this. I think our downtown has a level of vitality that's equivalent to or greater than all of those other peer communities. So I believe that the market study that told these applicants that it was a go is on the money. I think that we should have an expectation that our downtown can support this kind of project. It really doesn't have a competitor in the community right now in terms of upscale, small community downtown living, and so I'm very comfortable with this project being a viable project. So my recommendation to the commission and to the board is that I feel that the project is worthy of zoning map approval for the planned development. And I've made a few recommendations for conditions, and Attorney Dregney has reflected those and others in the draft ordinance that he's put together for your consideration.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Boudreau has a question.
So for the benefit of Brett and Brian, who are kind of coming into the village at a unique time in our history, maybe haven't had a chance to hear all of the discussions that we've had over the last year or so about the Central Campus in particular. I'd just like to go back and revisit that for a minute and maybe do a quick catch up to where we are today. So when we met in the Village Hall and we sat down with the Legos and we had 80 or so residents come, one of the potential sites for some of the village buildings was that site, was the ground floor of that site. It was a mixed-use public-private partnership that was proposed by Jeff Grenier and CIA. And there was some discussion about whether a senior center might go over there. There was some discussion about whether a village hall might go over there with the chamber. So since that time, we haven't really had much more discussion about the Central Campus relative to that parcel. We have had more discussion about the Central Campus, and the property of the old Methodist Church came up, and that wasn't even on the table at the time that we all gathered and thought about Central Campus. But now it's in play. As I look around downtown, and we've talked about this with regards to the Methodist Church property, there just isn't a lot of property downtown. And yet we have to find a way to site the Village Hall at some point, the Senior Center at some point, the library at some point, and potentially the Youth Center / Chamber of Commerce at some point. And all of this is in my mind at a time when we're looking at the potential costs and the potential impacts of just the one project, and that'll come up later in today's board meeting, I think. And that being potentially pretty sizable. So in my mind, I have a couple of questions. And the first question is, if this site was to be fully developed as apartments, and that then taken off of the potential for public-private partnership, potential municipal building with apartments above, how would that limit us in our ability to complete the central campus plan? And my second question is, how would we prioritize borrowing when on the one hand we've got the immediate need of the central campus, and on the other hand we've got a TIF request coming that potentially doesn't include any add to the central campus?
I'll tackle the first.
I'll take the second one.
Okay. We work together a lot. So the central campus plan, I think, our civic campus plan, I think one thing that came out of the workshop with the Legos is that all of the projects identified, the senior center, the library, and ultimately perhaps a replacement for this building or an addition, are essential long-range projects. And that to get everything to fit on the current sites, and these buildings were placed here when the village had a population of somewhere between 700 and 7,000, and to expect those sites to accommodate these facilities as the village moves towards a population of towards 15,000 and above, it's probably unrealistic. That particularly based on the soils over at the library and senior center site, the two buildings, the modest sized buildings that we have now, are the only really good soils for building in the property that the village owns. So to fit both the senior center and the library over there, we were at 3 stories. And I think that was one of the insights that came out of the workshop. I think from a kind of a cold technical planning perspective, the subject property is a viable site for the senior center. But another thing that became evident during the workshop and after was that the workshop generated a lot of public discussion, and many seniors communicated with the village and the senior center director and indicated a real reluctance to have the senior center relocate, that the current location was seen as the preferable location. And a larger senior center, as identified by the space needs study, would fit at the current site and would fit best if the library was somewhere else. And ideally, there are benefits to having them located next to one another, but with no other property available on that block of sufficient size, including the bowling alley property. And concurrently, the emergence of the Old Methodist Church property as a potential location, I think that where things have ended up, where we're looking at the Old Methodist Church property for the library, was an evolution that none of us anticipated when we started the civic campus plan, but I think has identified a very viable alternative. And given the lack of other options, combined with the direct input from senior center users that we received, that the preference was for it to stay put, I think that we're on track for a very solid physical relationship between the various civic campus uses. And I would say that the potential relocation of the library to the old Methodist Church site frees up a wider range of possibilities, both for the long-term viability of the senior center at that location, essentially maybe a site that's good for 100 years, not just 30, and will allow a lot more flexibility in terms of what is considered for this facility in the future. In a nutshell, there's room to work with now for those other facilities if the library moves to a different site. In terms of financials, just briefly.
Oh, before you move on
Yeah.
from there, could I ask you a clarifying question? So you touched briefly on the village facility, I think by referencing this facility. That was actually the majority of my question was, what's your vision for the village hall if that site comes off the table as a potential?
So if we only are talking about a future village hall and not a village hall senior center or a village hall library,
Right.
and given the fact that the youth center and even the food pantry or the chamber are minor square foot users, now we have the ability for a number of options for this site. Number one, add on to this building, as an example, a meeting room upgrade and an elevator core that provides access to all floors from an enlarged lobby like most village halls for a community of 10 or 12,000 would have. A second alternative would be a more substantial replacement of the basement functions of this building on a main floor. Both of those could occur with this building's core, remaining. And a third option would be a total replacement, and that would require more careful consideration of what we do for parking in the interim. But that building, for example, could either replace a building here or move into the parking lot to create an urban street frontage along Janesville Street, which would strengthen I think the image of the community. But then we would need to provide replacement parking very close by in a significant amount. If we were talking about all of those facilities having to occur here on this block and on the library senior center block, we wouldn't have nearly that amount of flexibility, and parking would be more severely stressed. Finally, the previous concept that we were looking at that had the apartments with the senior center wouldn't provide any more tax base than this proposal does, because the senior center wouldn't be taxable, and we were talking about roughly the same amount of apartment square footage. I thought it was a compelling idea, but I'm not a user of the senior center, and one advantage of being a planner is not being able to put yourselves literally in the shoes of users of facility. And so I think we had an opportunity through the workshop to listen to what some of the users were saying or stimulate their comments back to our village staff. And I think we learned something important, that given the concentration of senior housing right around the current senior center, particularly for lower income and less mobile residents, the current location was strongly preferred by the users.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we have enough space on village-owned property to have several options for the village hall itself.
To have several long-term options, also not a 30-year building, but an 80-year building, for example.
Thanks.
On the borrowing issue, I expect the question perhaps was generated by virtue of the fact that there's a TIF request. Is that correct? You're wondering how you might address,
Yeah, so
how
one
that
of the-
might fit into the bigger picture?
So one of the things that I think is really good for developers and good for the village as we go through this, because this process is a long process just to get to the dance, and then if all of a sudden we get to the dance, there's real concerns about the TIF money, that's an unfortunate waste of developer time that could have been spent more productively, having a more honest conversation. And so as I sit here now, looking at just the size of investment that we might have to make in the library and the senior center, in my head, I start to say, well, how can we add borrowing on top of borrowing for a project that will be beneficial for the village, no doubt about it, but in the short term would not necessarily contribute to the capital improvement plans that I feel we need to prioritize.
So I think there are kind of two things we're going to have to look at to make sure we don't run into a problem of that sort. One is, what's our debt capacity? Before we're going to issue debt for this project, we're going to evaluate our debt capacity and make sure that we have sufficient capacity to cover whatever the village might. And I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think that it's unlikely that we're going to hit our constitutional debt limit, or
That's not an issue.
so that's not going to be a problem. So the only concern then, I think we're going to run into, or the only other issue to manage is the village going to be taking on more debt that village taxpayers are going to have to be responsible for?
Right.
And the idea here would be no. If this is going to be a TIF-funded project, we're going to make sure that the taxpayers are not exposed to any of that TIF funding. And there are a couple of ways to approach, there are a variety of ways to approach that. One way might be to say, this is going to have to be a developer-funded TIF, where we're not going to borrow any money. The developer's going to have to borrow the funds and get paid over time out of the increment they generate.
Pay as you go.
Pay as you go. That would be one approach. An alternative to that, equally viable, would be that we would issue debt, but we would have ironclad guarantees to make sure that the taxpayers are never exposed to having to make debt service payments, that the project itself is going to fully fund those debt service payments. So, given that we don't have a debt limit issue, and that's not going to be an issue, the only question is how do we manage our this project, our participation in this project, if there is any, to make sure that the taxpayers are not having to take that on at the same time as they're taking on some other projects. And so we'll tackle that issue, and it's quite manageable. I don't see a problem working our way through that with the developer and the TIF analysis and that discussion.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Matt.
Any other questions at this time?
So Matt, the number 4 is you're gonna review the GDP ordinance with us?
Yes, so this ordinance does provide for approval of the general development plan and of the change in zoning to planned development district. I basically tracked your plan, Mr. Slavny's recommendations, both in all respects. I mean, his memo really identifies what's going on here, and I've built that into the ordinance with respect to the flexibilities that are provided by this zoning, the recommended findings, and the conditions of approval. I do have one thing I just want to check on. I previously had a condition of approval in here which I removed, and I'm glad I removed it because I wasn't sure how we would manage it, and it relates to the fact that you've got now your report from Jeff Held that you've heard on where he is with the traffic analysis. And I did have a condition in here previously indicating that the zoning wouldn't be effective, and I wasn't sure how to draft this until his report was done and somebody was happy with it. But, what does that mean, really? So I guess my question I wanted to ask Mike and Jeff, I guess, is there any concern that either of you have that we won't be able to manage the traffic-related issues here on this site? Given, is there a reason to say, wait, we can't do this until we have that study completed in December? Because I took that out.
I don't believe so. I don't see any major red flags here. It's a project that is going to bring a little more traffic, cars to the street, but the street's generally functioning pretty well. There's some times when the queuing backs up to or possibly through these driveways, but it's pretty rare, and I don't see that being a major concern. I think there may be a couple of tweaks we could make It would be nice to try to get a turn bay into this development. And we're still kind of looking at the specifics of the geometry out there, and can we squeeze that in with where the curbs are? And it looks like we can. It'll be tight. So I think we're going to be okay from a traffic standpoint. It's kind of in the eye of the beholder, though. There's trade-offs with any project.
And we're going to have authority through the SIP process to address the entrance to the site and traffic circulation and things of that nature. Is that adequate from your perspective?
That's correct. So one difference between the general development plan step, the zoning step, and the specific implementation plan step, which is the site plan and the architectural details, is that the issue of should we have 2 lanes out, 1 left turn, 1 right turn from the parking lot, that's an SIP issue and dependent upon what we learned from Mr. Held's report. We know that there's room out there for 2 lanes out, and that was one of the recommendations from the public that we heard at the public hearing. And then over the long run, well beyond the approval period that we're looking at, again, now we have the option to look for viable long-range interconnection kind of opportunities that are really not part of this project, but they're enabled by this project, and those opportunities currently aren't present. And in my mind, the opportunities that this project opens up in terms of that kind of interconnectivity are likely to at least counterbalance the additional traffic caused by this project. You know, one thing that occurs to me is we have been constantly approving development on the west side of the village. That's our main growth area. I don't know, I'm guessing half of that traffic comes back into the downtown, right to this intersection, compared to the hundreds and hundreds of units that we've approved out on the west side now and will likely continue to approve. This project is an increasingly small or a decreasingly large.
It's a blip.
It's less and less of a percentage of that overall development that our approvals are sending to the downtown intersection.
And just the type of development being downtown and close to the commercial reduces the traffic burden too, because it makes biking and walking a viable alternative to driving a car for a lot of trips that people make. So that's sort of built in to the type of project that you have here as well, is sort of a reduced impact on traffic.
Thank you. So I should have started just by mentioning we're here for a first reading tonight. So unless the board chooses to suspend the rules and move to a second reading and adoption tonight, we're expecting that this is just going to be a first reading, and this will come back to you at your next meeting for second reading and an actual vote. Just want to make that clear.
Can you go over since it wasn't laid out as an option, can you go over what the rules would be and how we would elect that option if that's what we wanted to do? In terms of going directly to the second reading and adoption?
We would need a 2/3 majority vote of the village board to suspend the rules that require 2 readings at 2 separate meetings. And then if the board did approve that by a 2/3 majority, you could move to you could actually vote on it tonight.
And what's the benefit, or what would the primary reason be for delaying the second reading? Not moving directly to it.
I don't see a need for you to do that tonight. We did actually discuss this at a staff level. Is there any reason to suggest to the board that they move more quickly, and we don't see that? I think our recommendation is you do a first reading tonight, and then you come back and at your next meeting and you do your second reading and vote, so you don't suspend the ordinary procedure. I think that's our recommendation.
Yeah, we've tended to stay with the ordinary procedure unless there's a real need to move faster. It gives a little time between the decisions, if questions come up, that type of thing, and also gives time for any feedback from the public. Like Jerry said, people have asked him about this a fair amount. It gives a chance for a little more feedback from the public and so on. All the feedback I've had has been real positive. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
You'll note that there is a recognition. One of the conditions of approval is that the village and the developer here will need to enter into a development agreement that would address a number of issues, including the exchange of property between the developer and the village that was explained earlier in terms of the parking area. The use of tax incremental financing to facilitate the development. We're going to need an agreement on this before this would be effective. Reconstruction of the parking lot, the entire parking lot, and the coordination of construction with continuing access to the parking lot during construction. That's going to have to be addressed in the agreement, we think. Cross easements between the village and the developer to ensure that both the developer's tenants and the public have the access they need to the parking area and to the building. Potentially relocation of the utility pole in the parking lot. Final decision hasn't been made about that, but we may be addressing that in an agreement. Responsibility for parking lot maintenance and snow removal, and that's something we're gonna have to talk about because it's a parking lot that both parties are gonna be accessing and using. Relocation of the public dumpster enclosure currently located in our parking lot to a location that provides clear access to the 3 parking spaces serving the Dietz property and provides clear potential access to the north-south drive aisle serving Ziggy's Smokehouse, and provides clear potential access to the north-south drive aisle serving UW Health Clinic. These are basically recommendations coming from Mr. Slavny that we address these issues.
And I know that there are several solutions that accomplish those 3 objectives.
And so we're going to have to negotiate an agreement that addresses TIF and all those other issues. I expect that's going to take several months at least. So we'll be talking about this probably in February, if not March. Paragraph B requires that the project provide an appropriate number of surface parking spaces reserved for use by the Jefferson Crossing tenants and their guests, beginning with a requirement to provide 28 surface parking spaces that are so reserved. And the point of that is to say that the 28 stalls on site that are being characterized as, parking available to the Jefferson Crossing tenants and their guests, we want to make sure they're reserved for that use. And we don't really anticipate anything other than that happening, but we want to make sure that, for example, the developer doesn't decide to lease those parking spaces to somebody else. We're not really expecting that here, but this makes sure that those have to be reserved for that building. And then after 2 years after occupancy, this ordinance indicates that the developer can come back to the village and talk about whether it makes sense to free any of those 28 stalls up for other use, potentially. And then next, this ordinance requires that the 60 dwelling units in the project must be provided with an underground parking space as part of their unit and included in the rent. So we don't want them to say, well, these underground parking stalls are, available, we can rent them to people, but, they're not necessarily provided to everyone who has an apartment. We want to make it clear, everyone who has an apartment, I think there's one unit that would not have an apartment.
Underground parking lot.
In an underground, but otherwise, every unit in the building would have an assigned underground stall. That'd be a requirement of the zoning. They couldn't change from that without coming back to the village and getting approval. And again, these are all provisions that are designed and intended to the extent we can make sure that the parking that's being provided for that site is actually used and available to that site to make sure we don't create any undesirable parking impacts. And there's a need to have a certified survey map approved and recorded as part of this process. That's the other condition. Those are the key conditions that have to be satisfied for the zoning to be effective, and this ordinance gives the parties until the end of next year to satisfy all of those conditions if necessary. I know they'd like to move more quickly on that, and we'll certainly do our best, but that's, if they can't get it done by the end of next year, then this approval would essentially expire. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but that's the ordinance.
I know that Brett was talking about the parking stalls not necessarily being part of the rent, or there being no monthly fee. And I'm just wondering, from Brett and Brian's perspective, would you rather discuss some of this now and have us take it into consideration prior to Steve signing it? Or would you rather just have us approve what's in front of us, have Steve sign it, and then come back to us later?
Yeah, we've had time to look at some of those recommendations, and we're both acceptable to those. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
That's my question.
Anything else? Okay. It's back to you, Jeannie.
Okay, so then I would make a motion that we waive the first reading of ordinance number 1632. And then we will wait and take actual adoption until our next meeting.
I second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So you're going forward. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I think you've had a great vision of what to do here, and I think that's a message you got from the board too, as they made comments or nodded their heads. So we're excited to have you in the downtown area and move this forward. We'll go as quickly as we can, but probably not as quickly as you want. I would guess you've experienced that with government before, so. Yes. Okay, very good. Thanks. Have a good evening. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so we'll go on to item 4, status of village acquiring the former Methodist Church property. November 16th, village administrator's response to property owners' November 12th email says that at our meeting on the 14th, the village board authorized the village attorney to prepare a purchase agreement for the former Methodist Church property consistent with the terms outlined in your November 12, 2016 email. We'll move as quickly as possible. The village appreciates your efforts on this matter. So, you want to go ahead, Mike,
Sure.
and kind of bring everything
So,
up to date, then there's a lot more there.
Yeah, Matt is in the process, based on that direction from the board, of preparing an offer to purchase. And to try to keep this going so that we can try to close this year, we were wondering if it'd be possible to have a special meeting next week, Wednesday, November 30th at 5 p.m. for the board to look at the draft offer to purchase. And I think, Jeff, do you think we'll have the...
Me, Jeff?
Jeff, yeah. Do you think we would have the phase 1 proposal by then, or not? Pretty tight with Thanksgiving, eh? Yeah, so maybe we'll bring that. We definitely should do a phase 1. And so maybe we'll end up bringing that to the December 5th board meeting.
I think December 5th, because just with this week being scarcer and scarcer.
So I'm not saying we're going to have it. Matt, we're talking about the special meeting next week, Wednesday, to look at the offer of the purchase. Okay. We were just thinking any additional time we can get it, have the board look at, and Sunday we gain 5 or 6 days, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So.
Can we be done by 6:30?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then I'm available.
Okay.
I'm available.
Okay.
Next week, the date, but
The 30th.
On Wednesday. Yep. Does that work, Jerry?
Yes.
And Doug?
Yes.
Okay.
5 o'clock.
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
Looks like we're all set over here.
Yep.
5
So what I'll
o'clock.
do, 5 o'clock. Yep. So I will not send the agenda out till probably like next Monday, because I'll wait and see if Matt's has the agreement done. So. Okay, great.
So it's on only if we get the agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I'll send you an email either way.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for that.
So,
Yep, I'm sorry.
you do anything on 4B?
No, that was more for the public information. I wanted the public and the village residents to see that.
So for folks who are watching, if you look online, you'll see quite a bit of information on this under item 4B. And kind of brings you completely up to date on where we are with the Methodist Church property and the purchase there. Did you have to make any comments on this, Mr. Slavny, or, okay? So we'll go on to item C, discussion possible action, conflict waiver of interest with Von Briesen and Roper Law Firm. That law firm represents the former Methodist Church property owners and also represents the village during union bargaining and other personnel matters. So recommend motion is to authorize village administrator to sign a waiver of conflict interest. So we need that motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item D for discussion only, it's not a final plan, discussion of draft 2017 preliminary finance plan by the village's financial advisor, Ellers.
So Lisa and I are starting to work on the 5-year financial plan with Jim Mann from Ellers. And I know there has been discussion about if we buy the Methodist Church property, how does that fit into our overall debt service? We build a library, how does that fit in? And so we asked Jim to look at a couple different scenarios. The first one is basically just borrowing for an $8 million library. And I will say that he starts the debt off probably a year early, but it still kind of gives you a feel for what it would do to our taxes. And then the other two charts are here are it's an $8 million library, a $4 million library, and then we're also borrowing on average $2 million each year over the next 5 years for additional capital projects. And so this is not have our capital improvement plan analysis, and Lisa and I are working on finalizing that with department heads. But we just wanted to give the board just kind of an overview of how the impact would be and how we're going to have to work somewhat hard to try to flatten this out, feather this in, so that we do not spike taxes. Taxes are going to go up if we do these things, but the goal is to try to lessen the impact as much as we can. That's what Jim Mann will be doing with the staff and the board, starting probably after the holidays.
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
Talk about an impact between 432 and 543 on the average homeowner.
Which chart are you on?
I'm on the memo.
Oh, the memo. Okay, yep.
Would that be over how many years?
So he's looking at the chart. So it was right now, for example, the annual cost is like, for example, the $8 million library. The annual cost is $300, goes to $270, and it jumps up into $500 as an annual cost. And he's just trying to give you just a kind of a feel for what the impact would be on an average homeowner. And that's what I was saying. I think that's what we're going to have to look at to try to somewhat flatten that out or feather that in over the 5. And we're just looking out that this would be borrowing this kind of money for the library for over 20 years. And I don't know if you noticed that one of the things that Jim is still working on is whether or not we would qualify for a 40-year loan for the library, like the city of Baraboo is using, which obviously would take that money out over 40 years, which obviously lessen the burden. So we're still working on that.
Thank you.
Mike, just want to call everybody's attention to the column that says increase over prior year.
Which page are you on?
Any of the sheets. You can just look at any of the sheets, and I'll call your attention to the third year. That's where the spike begins, is on the third year.
And Jerry, and that's what I was trying to say, most likely that is probably not when we're going to borrow for the library, but it's probably going to be at least a year later, but.
Yeah, whatever, but I mean, at that point, whenever we start this process, about the third year, somewhere around the third year, there is a big spike. $8 million library is $100 a year.
Right.
On our second sheet, it's $242 a year, and on the third sheet, it's $155 a year. That's the column we have to pay attention to.
Well, I think maybe that's what Doug was getting a little bit. So you maybe should look at the annual cost and then the increase, because the increase then after that big bump is really not that bad. Like if you're looking at the $8 million plus the 2, but you got to jump up pretty big in 1 year to get up to that.
Yep.
And so that's what Lisa and I and Jim will be working on with the board.
Right. And I guess that kind of indicates why we have to feather that in.
Mm-hmm. Well, as much as you can. I mean, if you borrow the money,
I mean, there's no way you're going to build a new library without an increase in taxes.
I don't know.
There's no way.
Yeah. And some of the some of the, I don't know if you noticed, there was a comment that Jim had in his memo. He said, I'm going to read it for you here. Given the 2016 levy for debt service and the anticipated drop in the 2017 levy for debt service, the village may want to consider stabilizing the levy for 2017 to avoid seesaw effect on the levy. This could be accomplished by increasing the operating levy to either place funds in reserve or cash fund other village capital improvements. So obviously, it's too late to do that for 17. So when we're working on this with the board, we'll be looking at trying to do that in 18 and 19. And what that means is that if you look, our debt service impact is actually going down because we're using impact fees for 17 and probably for 18. So Jim is saying is that rather than continue to reduce the levy for debt service, you keep the levy up, but buy equipment with cash versus debt service, so that all of a sudden you don't have this humongous increase like in 2020.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and there's one other piece of the puzzle that I would imagine warrants some consideration as we go through this process, and that's the fact that with the school referendum, that's going to raise taxes at some point. I don't know how much, but I would assume it's going to be $100 or more per year. And, it's worth it. Education's an investment in the future. So, but, we come to spiking the property tax rate. That is part of the equation moving forward.
I think it's really important to be careful of the things that we're telling the public right now. I think what I'm hearing Mike say is that he's working very hard to make sure that we don't spike the tax bill for any homeowners, and that there's a way to proceed where we can thoughtfully feather in the potential changes to the taxes as a result of the investments that we need to make.
But that's going to be a challenge because we have to consider the school part of it.
Well, it's going to be a challenge, yeah, but it can be done.
I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying, I'm trying to indicate that it's going to be a much bigger challenge than the library. Yeah. So.
Well, and I think Steve had a thought about, I'm not prepared to talk about the impact of the school referendum on the taxpayer, but do you have any thoughts in your mind, any facts in your mind about that?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact dollars, but I think if that's going to enter into our thinking, we should have the exact dollars that's going to be,
Right.
so we don't
Right.
go high or low, but we know exactly where that is. And we may also need to take a look at where Oregon fits in Dane County with taxes to kind of get a handle on, our rates higher, lower, kind of in the middle or whatever. And Jeannie has talked about that, and I think staff is working on that also to help us understand where we are and how that impacts us going forward. I think it's doable to make it work and still have us be okay as far as taxes go.
I appreciate Doug's caution, or Jerry, I appreciate your caution. I just want to be careful that we don't use emotionally charged words and get people excited when we're deliberately working through issues, and we'll be able to present a well-informed option to the public at some point.
That's a good point, and the reason I don't bring it up at all is that the fact that when the tax bills go out, our staff gets the calls, regardless of whose increases cause the tax bill to go up. So it's a point bearing in mind, I guess is all I'm saying.
And we're counting on you to keep the county taxes way down too.
They're going to be just fine. It'll be wonderful.
I was trying to, I found that note, and this is in Jim's email, in reference to the USDA program. I haven't run any numbers on that one yet, but recognize that that's the 40-year one. But recognize that the debt service would be about 60% of the 20-year option. So that would give us some flexibility in the debt service. The other thing I wanted to mention, and Lisa and I discussed this more than a few times. If you look at Jim's memo and then look at the projected equalized value, he's being very conservative on his increases. We're some respects doubling those values, but we cannot predict the next recession or downturn. So at this point, we're being very conservative on the increases on the value. Obviously, the values go up, it lessens the impact on your debt service. So And Jim can talk about that some more when he's here to do the presentation, so.
Okay.
So I really emphasize on the agenda, this is not final. This is, I know Bill's gonna do a story on this, but I do not want, I agree with Jeff, I'm glad, that we do not want to be spooking village residents about this. This is just starting to work out the debt service.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know Bill is watching at home for his story. And the point I just made, this is not a final plan.
Yep.
We're
Far
just
from
getting
it.
started.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill.
He'll
Is that
call
your
me.
quote? Is that your quote for
He'll
the
call
You
me.
bet,
this
he's
week?
got it now.
Yeah. He doesn't need to call?
No, their publication date for this week was today, so
Oh,
they're a ways out for the next one. I talked to him this morning. Okay, anything else on this, anyone? Okay. That takes us to 4E, discussion of possible action regarding civic campus sites and geotechnical evaluation and recommendation. That's a nice way of saying soil borings, I guess.
That's the official way to say it. Some people say dirt, some people say soil, right?
Okay, so recommended motion is to approve the proposal from Professional Services Industries for geotechnical services at all three locations outlined in the proposal dated November 10, 2016, the amount of $8,775. So
I'll
we
make
need a
that motion for discussion, please.
Thank you,
I'll second.
thank you.
The J.C. Park West, that's about, let's see that breakdown here now. I thought I saw it before. Anyway, since we are not gonna be constructing there, do you wanna save some money?
I expected this question. I also expected it to come from that area of the table over there. And we talked about that, actually. Actually, we were recommending that it be kept in there.
Okay.
Primarily because there's actually ongoing discussion at staff level with potential for, as we look at J.C. Park West, that's a very viable location for a parking area along that whole area. It could also be a viable location for a future building. Given the fact that we are in ongoing discussions with individuals in clubs in developing that park, I think it's very cost effective to have those three borings done now and
Okay.
included in the report.
Yeah, I mean, I brought that site up a
Yes.
while back, but
That's the Ball Lake Parking
I,
Club.
It's also worth it just to get your mind
At
finished
ease.
on this, Jerry. I think.
my mind?
Well, just to find out.
You've been a little bit of a dog with a bone on
Yeah.
this.
Yes.
Oh,
But,
have
you know, at the request of the village board, we did go out and solicited some proposals from, and we did receive 4 solid proposals. There was quite a range, as you can see in the amount of cost. And I did confirm with PSI that they're comfortable with doing it for that amount.
Okay.
I think, I do want to say that if we were physically going in to build a building at one of these sites, we may be looking at it a little more in-depth. And so there could be, you know, in the future, but if we're talking about it a $5 to $10 million building or something like that, honestly, the geotechnical is going to be the smallest part as we have. But I think there's good prices. I think we have a good price here. I also think, you know, someone we worked with just recently on Jefferson Street, they did a very nice job and provided us a very nice report for that. So we're comfortable with our recommendation.
Where in the budget will the money come from?
TIF 3, as well as just our general engineering funding.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? So we have the motion second for the geotechnical services at 3 locations, the amount of $8,775. All in favor?
Aye.
Wolf?
Motion carries. What?
He said woof.
Okay, item 5, 2017 village budget. I'd like to open the public hearing, and we'll start the overview of the 2017 budget.
And I'll start that the board wants me to. In your packet is our PowerPoint that we do every year for the budget, and I wanted to thank the board members for your input and direction during the budget, and especially thank Lisa, as always, for all the hard work. But this was actually, I think this is a good budget, but it also is a very challenging budget. I think Lisa will agree that there's a lot of changes, like every seemed like every week we either got good or bad news, and we were having to go back and forth. And we had that goal of trying to keep the annual increase under $60 for an average house, and I think we met that goal with the board's help and the department head's help. So,
along those lines, I really appreciated you setting that goal, and I appreciated how that kind of informed the discussion, and probably more than I know behind the scenes. And it made me think about the strategic plan of the village and how far out into the future we look, and whether it makes sense to try to tell the residents that there's a number that we try to stay under going forward. Because I think it sends two messages. One, I think it sends a message that, costs are going to go up, and that's just a reality of everybody's life. But the other, that we're aware of it, and that we want to make sure that they don't go up too much in any given year. So whether we actually wind up being able to fall underneath $60, no more than $60 a year or not, I think is not as important as sending the message that, if that is the number, that's the goal every year when we sit down and when we look forward.
Right. That kind of excuse me, ties back to what we're talking about with Jim Mann's charts. You're going to have you're looking at that chart, and that's just the debt service tax, and now we're talking about the total net tax rate. So, yep, I agree. Excuse me. The board held 3 budget meetings in October, including the joint meeting with the park board. And Lisa and I prepared the summary sheets, and I know we had the discussion with about the library position, and there's about a $22,000 difference between option 1 and option 2. The resolution that the board sees in front of you tonight is the one that reflects option 1. The board will have to give us some direction on which option you want to select, and then I know Nikki wants to talk about her handout that she provided this evening as well. As I mentioned, there were a lot of changes it seemed this year to the budget, but I think we're going to accomplish a lot next year, including reconstructing North Baroque from Jefferson Street to Baptist Creek, which needs it. I think we all agree, including Jeff Brown. Joint project on Jefferson Street with the county. I think that one's going to probably be the most dramatic as far as people really realizing that we're getting some streets in shape. That street's in bad shape. Moving the yard waste site down by the wastewater treatment plant. Continuing with engineering for the extending Perry Parkway. The goal now is in 2018. That's still our goal. Planning for the first phase of the bike trail along Baptist Creek from the West Side Park to North Baroque. Doing mill and overlays, increasing that from 200,000 to 300,000. We're carrying some money forward, and then adding 1 full-time patrol officer and increasing police training in 2017. At this point, the library, the levy going into the library would be going up about $61,000. We have some money set aside to begin what we call the wage market adjustments for village employees. We'll be talking to the personnel committee about that next year. As the board knows, we have the purchase of the Spillman record management system for the police department in the budget. And since this is the first year that the library budget has been pulled out of the general fund, that's why the general fund expenditures and revenues are decreasing, because we created Fund 203 for the library. And we mentioned this in the staff memo that we handed out at the last meeting. As you know, the state has revised how they determine whether or not a community qualifies for an expenditure restraint payment in 2018, or qualifies for expenditure restraint payment. Lisa feels, right, Lisa, that we are going to this budget will qualify for a 2018 payment. And that's $45,000 that we get from the state. So I think we're saying that at this point we think it qualifies. They could change the rules or adjust them. So we'll keep an eye on that. Keep the board posted on that. As I was mentioning, we got good news. Share revenue increased in 1 week. Then the next week we got the bad news that state aid went down from $400,000 to $373,000, which impacted the budget. We have a library employee going full-time May 1st. I'm sorry, these are changes since the November 14th board meeting. We reduced the contingency to 20,000. That was the number that we've been playing around to try to keep it under $60, the adjustment. The police department, we removed the recruitment out one more month. I think we're starting, Brian, March 1st now, right? Or end of February, something like that. Yep. We increased the police overtime for sergeants. And finally, as we always state, that a practice which started in 2004, we do not use fund balance for ongoing operations. And the fact that we're going to be borrowing money for the next how many years, that is something that Moody's always asks us. If they don't, we bring it up that we do not use our fund balance to cover operating items, which helps us, I think, in our rating. So we are here to present pleased to present the budget for consideration by the board tonight.
Okay, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank Mike and Lisa and the rest of the staff for their good job on this. They always bring a budget to us that we're able to look at and understand and make decisions on, and do a really nice job, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments, Lisa? Okay.
No, I covered it all.
Okay. So anybody else, Nikki, you want to address us during this hearing?
Yes, please. First off, I'd just like to say that the library is very grateful for the village board's support, as you've demonstrated in the sizable increase that you're looking at for the library's operating budget. This is the first year of a 4-year stepped plan. It's the most significant in that together we're making up for some lost time and progress. We'd also like to thank you for making this commitment to moving our community closer to where we need to be. And we really appreciate that you have to balance progress in all areas of the village with the library as well as the other departments. So thank you for that. I did give you a handout which talks about a little bit about why the step plan is important, and particularly in regard to staffing. Now, since options 1 and 2 were presented, there's been a little bit of change. What's referred to as the third person going full-time is a little bit confusing, but it was the third person that was taking benefits. The FTEs, it's only 0.4 FTE increase in this budget. Or that's being proposed in this budget. So we actually don't need as much money to get the person that we would like to start earlier in the year. It's been presented to you as starts in January, starts in May. The difference is now actually closer to $6,000 than the amount that you saw in your options. Ultimately, whatever you give us, we will make do with, but I did want to put in a word for the possibility of meeting that funding goal.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Nikki or comments?
Mike, would you give us your thoughts, please, on this?
So option 1, as Nikki sort of talked about, the position would be going full-time on May 1st. Option 2, that position starts on January 1st. So, and they both, as you can see, keep the increase under $60. And then we were working on option 1. We're constantly, I'm not picking on Matt since he's sitting next to me, but we're constantly worried about our legal fees. We're using our attorneys, not just Matt, but just our prosecution budget seems to be going up. And so we were just saying if the board wanted to, do option 1, but adjust the levy, we would, recommend, possibly putting some additional money into legal fees. We're trying to find where that sweet spot is, where we don't keep going over budget and legal fees.
So are you saying we do need more money for legal fees?
If the board wanted to do that, that would be an appropriate place if you selected option 1. If you selected option 2, then I would not do that, because that would get us too close to $60.
So if we did option 1 with the additional legal fees, what would that do to the tax levy?
it would make it $54 and, well, I should be careful here. Lisa, is it? Yeah, so that also includes the additional wage adjustment, so it'd probably be it'd be like $53, right? Yeah, about $53 increase, something like that, on an average house.
Thank you.
And by comparison, what would the impact of starting that,
The employee on January 1st,
employee at January 1st?
$56.74.
So $3?
Yes, it's close, yeah. I mean, both options, I mean, even if you just go option 1 to option 2 and don't include the other possibilities, you're only talking $5. It isn't like it's a big, like, it isn't like swinging it's $20 or $25 or something like that.
And I noticed, you didn't bring this up in your presentation, Nikki, but you had made some notes in the bullet points. The tax savings, can you just talk through that quickly?
Sure. So when we're looking at why we feel it's important to be able to fund this position earlier in the year than later, one of those facets is actually stretching taxpayer money to go farther. This position, the technical services assistant, whomever's in that position, basically saves the library a lot of money just by refurbishing, either cleaning, repairing scratch discs, extending the lives of the books and other materials that come through the library. So if we estimate that there's she or whomever extends probably 50 items at least go through her hands currently that she has time to address. And if we assume that that's per week, and if we assume that it's would cost approximately $20 to purchase and get a new version prepared to go out on the shelf, that's about $1,000 a week of savings, and over 17 weeks, that adds up. So that also, we're anticipating a greater volume of materials coming into the library, and we anticipate the bulk of that happening prior to the May date. Our biggest, the bulk of the items that come in that require the most processing all come at the very latest at May, because we are in preparation for summer library program, and we need those materials in advance and have to have them ready to go.
The one comment I should have made, even at the last meeting, is, we keep talking about this employee starting or not starting, things like that. Once the village board adopts the levy for the library, it's the library board's decision how to spend the money. So, you could say I want to vote for option 1 or option 2. Once the levy is established, the library board decides where the money gets allocated. So I'll make sure the board realized that. I should have said that last week.
So if we selected option 1, they'd have to decide what they want to spend the money on. They still have that option.
The board has increased money for books and AV and everything. The library board could sit down and move that money around and put it into something else. Once you give it to them, it's their decision how to spend it by state law.
Absolutely. I chose to frame it in the context of the January and May because that's how it was framed. So,
Nikki, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it true, looking at your memo here, you anticipate that hiring this in January will save on part-time?
Well, had we, this position is currently at 25 hours a week. If we were to fill in the other 15 hours with a different part-time person, we would really not get any savings in that, because the amount of training that would be required.
Okay. What about overtime? Are you going to save overtime?
Well, this position also helps fill in at the circulation desk as needed, and so that does help prevent some unnecessary overtime if we have that flexibility.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? So Nikki, remind me, what % increase did the library budget receive for 2017, do you know? Lisa, do you know?
I can probably look it up. So the original request, I don't have the option 1 and option 2 percentages, but the original request with no changes to health insurance because we weren't able to predict what would happen at that time. The village percentage was 6.49% increase.
Thank you.
Certainly.
And so you had brought to the board this timeline and this stepped increase of investment in the library that's necessary to catch us up to where we need to be when we need to be there. So in your mind, what's the impact of delaying the decision to give the library, well, I'll just call it option 2, because last time I tried to word it, I got tripped up. What, in your mind, what's the impact of the delay of 6 months?
Well, it will affect our volume and what we're able to put out and how timely we're able to make it available to the public. The public generally wants new items while they're new. That's one piece of it because the materials will be going up. Ultimately we need to get to 1.7 FTE increase sooner than later. The important thing is that it happens for sure this year, which is in the mix either way. I know you're presented with 2 options. I don't know what the exact financial impact would be for the taxpayer, but I believe it's closer to $6,000 increase rather than the larger step, or not step, I should avoid using that word since I've turned it into a catchphrase. It's, let's see, for insurance purposes, it's, rather than this, basically you could add 6,000 and we wouldn't get anywhere near the 17. If the person had, if things hadn't changed today, we would need approximately 17,000 more to fulfill the need, but we actually just need closer to 6,000. So I'm not sure if that's anything you want to entertain. Ultimately, whatever you decide, we are, we will work within those bounds.
I think what Nikki's saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the board's not confused, is that so the employee's not taking health, and I hate focusing on this employee, but the employee's not taking health insurance. So now I think what Nikki is saying is to move the start date from May to January, it's without health insurance, which is why it's only, you're saying 6,000, is that what you're saying? $6,000.
Yeah, it would take much less to accomplish that.
Right, so if you look at, it's sort of like an option 1A, or I guess it would be A. You would take option 1 and you would add whatever you're saying, 6,000, whatever the number is.
6,000, I have a more specific number, but it's like 5,893 is my estimate, but that might be slightly different than Lisa's because I don't know.
So if it's closer to 5, if you look, basically if you add $5,000, you're taking the adjustment to $52 and some cents, basically.
So basically what we're talking about is adding health insurance 1-1.
No.
No.
You're forget about the health insurance. All you're doing, then if option 1A would be moving the start date from May 1st to January 1st for about $5,000. So the person would be going full-time in January versus May, but without health insurance. And the impact would be raising the $51 to about 52 something, 52.40 or something like that.
How does the employee feel about that?
The employee has since made their decision. Since we had option 1 and option 2, it was determined that they needed to decide sooner than later, and they chose to forego insurance.
So, are you saying that the employee decided in the course of negotiation that they would prefer to go full-time in January and defer their insurance until May?
I'm not sure that that's a sentiment I'm willing.
They either have to start January 1 or they
Right.
have to wait till the next January 1 because of open enrollment. Because this employee has qualified to take health insurance for a number of years. And per the rules and regulations at ETF, from them changing from part-time to full-time is not a qualifying event. So they would have to wait until open enrollment again.
So they have to take full-time employment in January of 17, or else they have to wait until January of 18?
No, she can take health insurance right now if she opts to, because she qualifies for that benefit at this point in time. And it just, the percentage of employee to employer would change as of May 1 when she goes full-time because of the hours being worked. Going from 50 to 80 hours.
Maybe I misunderstood Mike.
So what we thought was going to happen was that, you know, a person could be part-time from January to May. An employee becomes full-time in May, it would be a qualifying event under
Right.
ETF rules. That's not true. I don't know if that's never been true or whatever. We finally determined after going through a few people at ETF that is not considered a qualifying event. So for her to have health insurance, for an employee to have health insurance under this circumstance, she'd have to have it as of 1/1/17. She has now declined health insurance for 17, so if she goes full-time next year, any point, she would be eligible for next year at this time under open enrollment to take health insurance for 2018. That makes sense. And what Nikki's saying is that now that employee's not interested in the health insurance, that it's
Reducing the impact of the decision.
it's whatever that $5,000, right? It's basically now you're covering her full-time expense from January to May, and you consider that like option 1A if you wanted to.
Thank you, Mike, for articulating what I was so clearly
Sure.
eluding me.
Couldn't we still just adopt option 2 and then you figure out the numbers later? Because option 2 just says includes the third library position going full-time January 1st.
So if you do,
That includes health insurance, though. Option 2 does. That included the employee starting full-time as of 1/1 and
Right.
family health insurance plan beginning 1/1.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the budget.
Oops, we're ahead of ourselves. We're still in the public hearing.
Oh,
We need to close that first to get our discussion done, so. Nikki, has the library board talked about, since this is now $6,000, has the library board talked about moving dollars around and covering that?
The library board has not had the opportunity to meet formally. I've talked to individuals on the board. We will make do with whatever you
Yeah,
allocate
okay.
to the library.
Yeah, I understand, thanks.
Mike, do you have an official recommendation? Option 1 or option 2?
well, I think that since the employee, did what she did, which I think is really great on her behalf for the village and the library, that I would compromise on this and I'm calling it option 1A.
Yeah.
And start it on January 1st full-time. It sounds, based on what Nikki is saying, it helps the library out tremendously as far as workload and things, so,
Yeah.
I feel comfortable doing that.
So we're gonna call that 1A?
That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah, that'd be
Lisa?
my thought to it.
Okay.
I mean, we have to appreciate what she has done to make this work, and it's also helped us, so.
Nikki, are you good with 1A? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
all right.
you know, I feel a little bit awkward, and I just want to make this comment that, how big is the budget for the village? I was trying to get a number quick, but I know it's in your head.
Well, I mean, the whole budget's like $11 million with water and sewer and,
So we've got an $11 million budget, and we've talked about everything that the village does, but this decision is coming down to an individual's taking insurance, and I just don't feel good about that. I don't feel that an individual should feel like they have to choose between working full-time and taking the insurance that they deserve to take care of their family. I feel there's other ways the village can cut expenses than that. And I'd like to challenge us to try to do that better.
Yeah, it's a tough decision, there's no doubt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, which takes us to that decision, which is 5C, discussion of possible action regarding adopting resolution number 16-32 tax levy and 2017 budget. So we need a motion on that.
Can I make a motion to accept the budget and option 1A?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Is that option 1A, Peggy?
I will say, Jeff, I appreciate your comment, but it's not unusual that as we get, I try not to do this at the public hearing. I try to have this ironed out. I do apologize for putting the board on the spot a little bit tonight. But it does come down to a lot because probably 75 or 77% of our budget is personnel. So it does, a lot of times, it comes down to starting a position later. Unfortunately, that's what it comes down to. So I appreciate your comment.
So any further questions or discussion on resolution 16-32 and the 2017 budget? Okay, so for motion second to adopt resolution number 16-32 tax levy 2017 budget, option 1A, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay,
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
We're done with the budget.
Yeah.
For like about 4 months. Now, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Has this been,
Well, like I said, we appreciate the work that all our department heads put into this. It's a big task, and I think there's a lot of teamwork that happens that makes it work, so.
I think the library board's doing a great job. They're trying to position the village so we meet the standards, and we'll be talking about that for the next 3 budgets. So it's good that we're having this discussion.
Yeah. Okay, item 6, public appearances are none listed. Item 7, items of the village attorney, discussion and possible action regarding agreement for land division improvements for the Bergamot development. This is Legend Hills at Bergamot, lots 1 through 15. And the recommended motion is to approve the development agreement. So we need that motion, please.
so moved.
Second?
Thank you. Comments here from staff?
Matt, do you have anything? No. I sent an email to him. I thanked him for signing it already, which is really nice on him. And they're obviously very anxious to start the project.
Yeah. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 8, approval of minutes are none before us tonight. Item 9, approval of vouchers. We have vouchers tonight. The amount of $37,460.89.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Are there questions on the vouchers?
Item 12475 to Eco Resource Consulting. I think it's probably something Jeff can answer.
I can. 124,
It's $3,000 north.
yeah, that's for the wetland delineation out at North Burr Oak. As part of that project, we're actually replacing the culvert this next year.
Oh, it's for that culvert? Okay.
Well, it's for the culvert on North Burr Oak,
Right.
not the one that we just did this last year. The one to be done.
Next year.
The one that's sunk.
No,
No?
this is the one, this is between the project between Jefferson Street and Baptist Creek. We're having to start the work on the,
Florida Avenue.
yeah,
Florida Avenue.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there questions on vouchers? Okay, so we have a motion second to approve vouchers in the amount of $37,460.89. Roll call, please.
Grenier,
Yes.
Carpenter,
Yes.
Staton,
Yes.
Brethauer,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Pollock.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item 10 is community input. Is there anyone who would like to address the board tonight? Judy?
Good evening. I first
Welcome.
want to take a moment to thank the board. The year's almost up already, and everything is going, we got the budget done, here, we want to, the chamber would like to thank the village board for everything that they do. So sometimes you don't always get thanked, so thank you. Some of the fun things, now I'm going to talk about fun things now that you've been so busy. We do have, I gave everybody a yellow sheet here. We are having a Shop Small Business Saturday. We're trying to create awareness to some of our businesses. The businesses decided they could do what, if they wanted to participate or not. We had 25 businesses that want to participate, and so we're going to try this out. We put it, these all went out in all the Oregon Observers, so we had over 5,000 made up. So hopefully we get some of our businesses get to see some excitement, even if they come in and get their a stamp on it. They still are going to walk in the store and they're going to see businesses. So anybody that's listening on TV, these went out in the Observer. We have some in the stores for you. So please participate. There's prizes, and the prizes will be handed out at our Santa, the holiday tree lighting. Santa's coming in on a fire truck, and then we're going to go over to the fire station and have a chili dinner. So the public is invited. We want to have a good time. So I'm hoping everybody comes and it's a nice time. The other thing I just wanted to add, being Josh's, is he back yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. December 10th, Josh is having the pancake breakfast at the fire station for the canines. So Santa will be there also. So we're keeping up, the Santa's knows what he's doing, and he'll be here for that too. So otherwise, any other questions? Because the year is ending soon, isn't it?
It is. Going by.
So thank you so much.
Thanks, Judy, we appreciate that. Item 11, proclamation announcements. Item A, board comments. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I wasn't expecting to say anything, but when the gentlemen were here, I'm sorry, Mary Davidson at 323 South Main Street, the newly remodeled South Main Street. When the gentlemen were here talking about the Jefferson project and the parking, and kind of quickly went through the possibility of having an access point there through Ziggy's, and I thought, oh my goodness, I walk that route regularly, back and forth from home to the library, and because of the angled parking there, it's really difficult for the people coming out of UW Health parking lot to see, is somebody coming, for them to be able to take a right turn. I would kind of hate for Ziggy's to possibly, their entrance exit to be a thoroughfare onto another point at South Main. I think that's solving one problem on Jefferson Street and it's creating a problem on South Main Street. So hopefully when he's working on that traffic study, he'll be cognizant of what a problem he could be creating on, so you'll tell him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a bad hip. So, excuse me. I'm Loretta Himmelsbach, and I'm president of the library board, and I just want to say thank you for your thoughtful discussion, and thank you for listening to Nikki and her incredible background that she's put together given the last-minute decision that was made today. She and I have been in contact and communication frequently about this, so I do want to say thank you for your thoughtfulness in this process.
Good, thank you, we appreciate that. Anyone else? One more option. Phil, you got anything to tell us?
I got plenty.
Not for TV, okay. We'll go on then for any board comments. Quiet group now, so staff comments?
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
What time is the meeting on Wednesday?
Next week, Wednesday?
Yeah.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, I just thought.
Didn't I say that before? I'm
No.
sorry.
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
Yeah, you did. I wrote it
Yeah.
down fine.
Oh,
You did.
I did too.
Okay.
Jeff and I were listening.
Here's not everybody was listening.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that's, I just whispered to Matt, I said, you know, I asked him if he's gonna actually have that offer done. He's working on it, so, like I said, on Monday, I'm gonna send you an email either way, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I ask a couple questions? Can I do that during board comments?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for Jeff. When are the leaves being picked up?
It's a very good question, and it's a question we get very often.
I know, I keep getting it.
Right.
So please give an answer.
Yes, okay, when early in the season, when the leaves are just starting to come down, we can actually cover the entire village in almost one day. We only have one truck with a crew of 2 people. When it gets to the point where all the leaves do come down and everyone takes them, it's usually that one nice weekend, which we had, 2 weeks ago, I think. Everyone takes them to the curb. It can take us up to 3 weeks to get through the entire village. And so we ask people to be patient. I will say that nobody is immune to their neighbors parking in front of their leaf pile, including the Public Works Director. And I'm waiting for the second go-around on their pass as well. But it takes a couple weeks. And if we can't get to them this fall, I mean, we continue to do it. Now, obviously, this is a holiday week, so it's a little short-staffed this week. But we'll continue to get to it. And if we don't get to them this fall, we'll get to them in the spring.
And then my second question is, what's happening with the roof on the band shelter in Triangle Park?
The roof on the band shelter was replaced this last year, and they're just finishing the fascia around there was some rotted wood around the base of that, and as part of the contract, which you guys approved a while ago, is just a replacement of that. That wood's been stained, and we've been in contact with the contractor to get that put back up.
Okay. Cool.
So the leaf crew is out every day, right?
Leaf crew is out every day, yes.
Yeah, I thought, okay.
My compliments to, regarding the South Main Street project. You got that buttoned up just before the...
Are you jumping ahead on the agenda here?
I
Still
didn't think I
anxious.
was.
Stealing Jeff's thunder.
11B3.
Okay, never mind. I don't have a question or a comment.
You retract your compliment?
No comment. Yeah. I'll
You got that down, Peggy?
Yeah.
No, actually, I can go into that as well. And on the leaf thing as well, in our capital improvement plan, you'll notice the next go-around for equipment, not this next year, but the following year, we have in there an additional automatic leaf pickup truck that allows one person to be able to drive the truck and pick up the leaves at the same time. It's all joystick controlled. Stoughton has 2 of these right now. It greatly increases the speed at which we can cover the village,
So it's a one-man
It's a
operation?
one person
one
operation. They sit in the right-hand side and they operate a mechanical boom with a large suction hose, and it, goes off the side. I will say one of the things that can make it a lot quicker for residents, if you're out there watching, is to move it away from mailboxes, move it away from trees. The equipment we have does not really go around items like that real easily. So as long as it can be brought out to the terrace, but not in the roadway.
I was talking to somebody that does that operation for City, Madison. They call that an elephant truck.
Yeah, with the big snorkel or
Yeah,
the big
yeah.
snout. Yes, exactly. I've seen it suck up a 12-inch diameter pumpkin before. It's kind of fun. So I'll go on the South Main and Elm Street item, and that project was wrapped up last week. There's just some very, very minor things on a punch list still, but for the most part, we're 100% done up there. Obviously, we're not going to have a growing season this fall, but I think the contractor did a very nice job. That project was challenging in time-wise. It took longer than we anticipated, mainly due to the fact that the road had to be undercut almost 100% along both routes. The flip side of that is we got very nice, strong backfill and a geotechnical fabric in there, so we expect the road to last for a very long time. I want to thank the residents. Hopefully, we've been communicative with them pretty much, and trying to get information out. But they've been patient, and now they have a very nice road for a while.
Thanks, Jeff. So, any other staff comments?
Just
Got a couple, go ahead.
Yeah, just that the personnel meeting that was scheduled for next Monday got moved to December 5th at 5 o'clock, and then we'll have the board meeting around 6 o'clock that night. So no meeting next Monday night.
Anything else for staff? Seeing none, we'll go to item 12. Communication, miscellaneous business. Item A, discussion and possible action, interim custodial services plan for cleaning of village hall buildings. Recommended motion to implement the custodial service plan 1A and 1B as outlined in Public Works Memorandum dated November 16, 2016, and retain the firm Environmental Control of Wisconsin for select janitorial services at Village Hall, Police Department, and Senior Center. This service and plan would be in effect until modified by staff and approved by the Village Board.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a thorough memo on that. The staff is all set to go with it, Jeff?
Yeah, just to give you a notice that, I mean, we are, really work on a 60-day contract with this, so we're not signing ourselves up for an entire year or something. This is an opportunity as we're actually down one staff member right now, and actually we'll be down a second staff member in a period of time under a family medical leave. And so this will allow us to be able to ramp up for now, to be able to cover the bases, ramp up again when that person goes on leave, and then be able to ramp back down when that person comes back and is able to do their job duties. And then we're going to continue to look at this to see how it works and see how we effectively can use this service. And we're also looking at the financials to make sure that we're not blowing our budget on this either. It looks pretty good so far, actually.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'm just going to make a comment. I know the senior center always needs extra for putting up tables and taking down chairs and so forth. But I did see in there where the janitor would be doing that, and then when he goes on leave, and then the public service people will be doing it then.
Correct, yeah. We'll be
just
having
wondered-
to cover them, including myself, to kind of help out with things down
Because
there.
that's a real job over there.
It is.
They have a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate that.
Anything else in this item? So we have the motion second for the custodial services for village buildings. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item B.
Thank you.
Discussion possible action, County of Dane purchase of services agreement. Recommended motion is to approve that agreement with Dane County.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. There's information in our packet on this. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item C, discussion possible action regarding payment service network agreements. The motion is to approve payment service agreements. Finance Director Novenska will review this agenda item in more detail at the board meeting, and the reasons why there's not time for it to go through the Finance Committee. So Lisa, I guess you're up.
So I was contacted by PSN, which is Payment Service Network, and that is our third-party collector for utility bills for the village. And they use a third party to do their collections. It's called Pivotal, and they're going away from that. They're going to be doing it in-house. Currently, when a resident makes a utility payment through PSN, they pay $2.99 convenience fee. Since they're going away with their third party and they're going to be doing it in-house, and that was for any kind of payment, whether it be a debit or out of your checking account or with a credit card. But with them going with it in-house, it'll only be $1 per, for checking and savings transaction, it's gonna only be $1, which before it was $2.99. And the credit card payments are gonna be a flat percentage, which is 2.75%. And in order for them to meet the $2.99 that they're currently paying, their bill would have to be $109 or over. So if it's $109 or over, they're gonna pay a little bit more. But the number of residents that affected was pretty minimal compared to all the other people that are gonna benefit from only paying $1. And they like to implement things on the first day of the month, so that's why they wanna start it on December 1st, if this is approved by the board tonight.
Is it your recommendation to approve, Lisa?
Yes, it's a pretty good savings. For the 3 months, and he sent me these stats from PSN, it would have been like $1,000, over $1,000 in savings for the people that are using PSN to submit their payments for utility.
I'll make a motion to approve this agreement.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further question or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Item D, discussion of possible action regarding the ordinance for regulation of alarm systems. The recommended motion is to refer that back to Personnel, Public Safety, and Protection Committee for further consideration.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments necessary here, or is it just as it is?
I think as it is fine.
Okay. Okay. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 13, report of committees, November 16, 2016 Park Board meeting. Trustee Breckhauer. Doug?
Yeah, Jeff Rowland met with the Park Board last week to seek direction on some possible improvements to the John Blanchard Dog Park. And the list of those recommended improvements can be found on the memo that's attached to the agenda. So the motion would be to approval of John Blanchard Dog Park improvements as outlined in items number 2 through 6 of the memorandum dated October 17th, 2016, and approval of modifications to the dog park fees as outlined in the memorandum dated November 17th, 2016, effective for 2017 and beyond.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Do we know what kind of revenue we're getting from the dog park?
Lisa?
I know that it's decreased from, I think this is the second year that we were selling the tags for the dog park. And I want to say,
$400.
yeah, it's about half,
Yeah.
and maybe even more than that, less than it was the year before.
Okay.
People just aren't utilizing it because of the condition of the park.
Correct.
So Jeff, item 2 says placement of gravel at both entrances. I know the small dog park is done. Is the other one going to get done yet this fall?
Actually, the small dog park is only partially done, because what we did is we found that what they tried initially was not going to work as it stands, just because when we get a heavy rain, all the soils hold so much water, and that water was also held in the gravel that was put down, and that becomes very gooey. And so we had to close it down for a little bit till it dried off. So what we're actually going to do is come in on top of that gravel pad, put a geotextile fabric down, which is an actual support grid, and then come back with some other gravel. And so it'll actually be built up about 4 inches above the existing area, and that should
Okay.
give a nice dry
Yeah,
pad.
okay. Good. That will be done yet this fall or in the spring?
We're gonna try to do it this fall.
Okay.
It's weather dependent again on
Right.
when we have staff available and stuff.
Okay.
That's the heat
Winter
turn.
again.
That's the heat turning.
Heat's turning on.
Is that in the budget?
That's in the budget, yes.
Marley.
Any further questions on Doug's motion? For the dog park improvements? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So item 14, minutes now requiring action with library director's report to the library board from November 2016. Thanks, Nikki. Item 15, unfinished business, there is none. New business, there is none. Item 17 is future agenda items that we could take a look at, know what's coming our way. Item 18, the board will meet in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.851E to discuss Oregon area fire EMS union negotiations and to allow village board members the opportunity to provide direction to the village's representatives on the fire EMS commission regarding the union negotiations. So need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, so we'll go to closed session. We'll unhook the mics to stay here. We will.